Welcome to Dysfunctionally Yours, the podcast where we embrace the chaos, laugh through the struggles, and find hope on the other side of trauma. I'm your host, Brittany, and if you've ever felt like your life was a beautifully messy roller coaster of dysfunction, trust me, you're in good company. Here, we'll have real, raw, and sometimes ridiculous conversations about mental health, relationships, and healing, because let's be honest, life isn't always pretty, but that doesn't mean we can't come out of it stronger and maybe even smiling. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of bubbles, and let's navigate this wild journey together, dysfunctionally, but never alone.
Welcome to the premiere episode of Dysfunctionally Yours. I'm terrified, like full transparency, absolutely terrified that here we are after all of this time. But yay for the premiere episode, and also happy would-be 28th birthday to my baby brother Chase. I could not think of a better launch day than what would be his birthday. And so with that, we're just gonna pop some bubbles. We're going to celebrate here. And I am 100% going to show you how dysfunctional I actually am. So with that, let's get into the point of all of this, right? So for years, since probably 2017, I have been passionate about really wanting to start a podcast and really wanting to share my story and some of the innermost workings of my brain with people, but also in a way that was genuine and authentic and really would touch people, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we need one another, and who better to learn from than each other. So I started making Instagram stories on my reels, not reels, gosh, long before reels. I started making Instagram stories that would be 60 seconds, sometimes 3 minutes, as they started to give you some more time, of just random Brittanyisms that I came up with throughout the day. And I was doing it every day, before work, on my way to work, sitting in the parking lot, or just as things came to me. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I started to get a lot of feedback from people, and they were like, oh my God, I love these. Oh my God, you should have a podcast. Oh my God, I would totally listen to you if you had more to say. And I had a friend, and she started calling me Unicorn Oprah. You're basically just Unicorn Oprah. That's a whole different story we can go into a different day. But she was like, the things that you say, I want to hear that. And so it got in my head, Brittany, you need a podcast. How do I do that? So with all of that, then in comes my best friend. My best friend is Kevin. He is amazing. You'll hear so much about him because he is my best friend. But he was like, I can help you with that. You should do that. And I support you. And that would be amazing. And I can help you. So he's like, come over to the studio and we'll see what happens. And so I'm like, okay, have no idea. Don't really have a plan. Don't really have a picture, but know that, well, Kevin said he was going to help me. So it's just going to be that easy. Right. And so I sit down with, somebody that he knows. We're trying to have a conversation about what it would look like and what it would sound like. And I was so insecure. I wanted this so badly, but I was so insecure and was like, actually, nobody cares what I have to say. What I have to say isn't important. I'm not smart enough. I don't know how to do this, really. So I got in my head. And, maybe I was hoping that somebody would actually know the path I was supposed to take and could point me in that direction and possibly do it for me even. Who's to say? I don't know. But I walked away from that moment with nothing more than I started with, and really not a plan moving forward. And I was like, well, that was fun. And I let that go. Then COVID came, and I'm still over here talking about a podcast. That would be so much fun. COVID comes up, and the rise of TikTok, right? And again, with my best friend, we're sitting around one night, we're having some wine, and he's like, you should start a TikTok. if you start a TikTok, you could build a podcast following and do the same thing that you do on Instagram, but you could do it on your TikTok, build a following, and launch it to a podcast. And I'm like, okay, it's COVID. What else do I have better to do? Literally nothing, right? Like, I'm sure we all felt that. And so I launch a TikTok page. I'm really like in the mindset, I'm going to do this. I'm getting one step closer. And so I launch an Instagram page, and I realize that the things that are gaining traction aren't the types of like bulletins and memos that I'm putting out on Instagram, but they're more of like the voiceovers, right? So this is the big time in TikTok where it's lots of dances and lots of voiceovers. And I was like, these are so much fun. I'm going to do these instead. And I was gaining a lot of traction on them and had a lot of views and was gaining a lot of followers on that. So I was like, sweet, I'm just going to keep doing this. Mind you, that also steps so far away from the original intent of do this to build your podcast. And it was like, well, out of sight, out of mind again with that. But I would still mention it. I'm going to have a podcast one day. I'm going to have a podcast one day. All right. So 2020 goes by, 2021 goes by, and still no podcast, still no closer to it. I have moved to Colorado. So now I'm away from my best friend, away from the studio, away from the people that had originally like really supported this idea and really said, I will help you do this. And so I'm like, well, c'est la vie. And then, 2022 comes up and Chase passed away. And that rocked my world in such a catastrophic kind of way. So then whenever I was going back to TikTok, it was no longer the voiceovers, but it was like I had so much to say. I had so much to say about mental health. I had so much to say about suicide prevention and awareness. I had so much to say about my own personal story and how I've gotten here and what I've overcome. I had so much to say about our legal system and the jail system and just being able to speak out and do and say the important things, knowing that if I could reach one human being, one single person, and help them, then I was doing something great. And that's all that I really wanted. And so I was content with that briefly. My best friend comes back out to Colorado to visit, and he starts up again. What about the podcast? What about the podcast? What about the podcast? And I have 100 excuses. I don't know how. I don't have anybody to do it with me. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. I can't do it alone. So many excuses. Like, talk about being your own worst enemy. Talk about getting in your own way. Because I have all these people telling me do this. I have people that I now know in my network that are like, you should have a podcast. You should write a book. Like, you're such an incredible person. You have so much to say. I have people now on TikTok that are reaching out and they're like, thank you for helping me. Thank you for letting me know that I'm not alone. Thank you for giving me somebody to connect with that knows what it's like to struggle so hard and wake up every day and just keep doing it all over again. Like, thank you for giving a voice to the things that we don't want to say. And so again, it's like coming at me that like what I have to say, it matters. He says, what about the podcast? And we go to the music store and we're looking at equipment, and he's like, it's easy. You just need this and this and this. And I'm like, okay. And he leaves and he goes back to Virginia. And again, it's like, okay, well, that was fun. And nothing came out of it. I did have a couple friends that I've met along the way that have these just beautiful journeys. I have a girlfriend, Lindsay. she'll be a guest at some point. She is an inspiration. She's such a go-getter. Like, her tenacity to like really help and be a voice and be like a shining bright light was so inspirational. And we could like kiki, we could laugh, we could joke. And I'm like, oh my God, our banter is great. This could be great. Let's have a podcast. And I'm so pumped, right? I have a person now. I have a person that's going to be a co-host with me. And so now I'm willing to figure it out. We get together, we start sort of just talking, planning, coming up with some ideas, and then she tells me she's moving to Florida. And I'm like, "Ah, I hate Florida." And also that sucks so much because like, A, my friend is leaving and I love her, and now I'm alone again. And B, there went all of the hopes and dreams of a podcast and somebody that like I can take this big plunge with and not be so afraid. It always feels better doing it with somebody that you're not alone, right? It's our biggest thing. We don't want to be alone. So that there it went again. Meanwhile, I'm still talking on TikTok. Like, I'm going to have a podcast. I'm going to have a podcast. I'm going to have a podcast, and not doing jack shit about jack shit to get this podcast. So like, am I going to have a podcast? I don't know. I'm just talking to talk, I guess. You know, ultimately it's the insecurity that creeps back in, right? Who wants to listen to me talk? And I had to shift that way of thinking, that it's not like somebody wants to listen, but like, I know I have something to say and I passionately want to share it, and, you know, share it in this like really fun and lighthearted way. I think that we all have so many things that are hard and heavy and weigh us down. We overcome as people so many trials and tribulations, sometimes by ourselves, sometimes with people surrounding us that have no idea what we're going through, and sometimes with these immaculate support systems that we're like, damn, I wouldn't have gotten through that without them. Everybody has a story, and I believe that people want to hear our stories because, like I said earlier, we want to know that we connect to somebody. We want to know that somebody out there sees us, that we're not alone, that it gets better, that there is a hope along the way. We want to be able to step away from our own problems and laugh and joke. We want to be able to like not always have like that like heaviness sitting with us all day, and to be able to like step away and have a laugh. And that matters. And I was like, I can do that. I can do that. I know that I can. I do it every day. I believe in being my real authentic self no matter what. And when Chase died, one of the biggest takeaways that I was able to walk away was with like, this boy is so much his most authentic self all the time. And I can do that too. I don't need to hide who I am, right? I don't need to hide the dark parts, and I certainly don't need to dim the bright light that I know that I have, because I have worked so hard to get here. And there have been so many people that I have leaned on and relied upon along the way that I know I wouldn't be who I am today, A, without those trials and tribulations, and B, without that support network, and then putting in the work, right? So I was like, we're going to do it. I can feel it. It's getting closer and closer and closer. I can feel it. And then I was like, you know what? And I read something in a book. Well, I wasn't like, you know what? I read something in a book, and then I was like, you know what? That is accurate. And it talked about the more people that we need to follow our dreams, the less likely that we are to succeed in getting there. And so it clicked in my head like, what? Who am I waiting on? I am where I am today because of all of the hard work that I put in, no matter what that is, whether it's in my personal life or as a mother or in my career or in my mental health. I am where I am because I put in the work. And so it became just glaring in my face that, like, Brittany, the podcast is the same exact way. This is your dream. You've been talking about it since 2017. It is 2025. Like, that is so long to be talking about something and not doing anything about it. If I was still just talking about being a good mother, I wouldn't have been able to raise my children. If I was still just talking about how I wanted to get better in my mental health journey, I would still be sitting in inpatient hospitals. If I was just talking about wanting to have the career that I have, I certainly would have never gotten enrolled in school to be able to get there. If I was still talking about wanting to move, to go back home where my heart was, I'd still be sitting in Virginia, not doing, like, just not fulfilled and not happy. And so every step of the way, I have been the person that has pulled up my bootstraps and done that for me. And so the podcast was going to be no different at all. So here we are. That's how we got here. And I'm so excited to be on this journey with all of you. I do want to say, like, once I got going with this, there were plenty of hurdles that I came up against. It wasn't just like, oh, I want to do this, and then the next day it happened. But I did give myself a deadline. I was like, the deadline is Chase's birthday. And I chose my brother's birthday because I'm broken, because I'm dysfunctional. I chose my brother's birthday because since he's passed, I have gone out of my way to be with other family members, to be with my dad, to make sure my dad was okay, to like plan extravagant vacations over my brother's birthday, to take my mind off of the fact that it was my brother's birthday. And this past fall, I realized I can only heal the way that I need to heal. And I actually can't hold myself back from healing because other people aren't in that same place to heal. And it's also not my responsibility to fix anybody or to force them to heal in a way that is helpful to me and not them. And so knowing that Chase's birthday was coming up was like, oh God, what do I do? What do I do? I'm taking time off work, but what do I do? What do I do? And it became just so obvious. That is the launch date. The launch date is Chase's birthday. And that way, every birthday is no longer just Chase's birthday, but it's also an anniversary. It's also a mile marker. Like, look how many episodes we got done at this point in time. Or, look, it's the first anniversary, the second anniversary, just something really exciting to look forward to instead of an impending doom and gloom. Because what I have also learned along the way is that it's all about our mindset and how we shift that. And if we want to remain in this very negative headspace, we will. We will. And there's nobody that's going to force you out of that. And if we want to be in a different headspace and we want things to feel lighter and brighter, then it's up to us to be able to do that as well. And so that's what I want to do. I want to continue to give space, to make space for my brother in a very real and authentic way. And I want to be able to make space for my own peace and my own solitude and what I need for myself to be better. And I can do both of those things together. And I also know that my brother would have wanted that for me. Being somebody that was his real, genuine, and authentic self, he also really respected me for being my authentic self and being able to talk so openly about where I had come from and share that in a way that wasn't forceful or aggressive on people, but just very real and raw and intentional. And he respected that in me. And I know that he would be excited for me to be here. I don't know that he would have been a great guest host, right? Because that boy was raw and rough. But he was awesome and he wanted me to be awesome. So here we are being awesome together. That being said, we are this far. And once I finally decided to do this, once I finally was like, here we go, here's the date, things really started to fall in place the right way. And I didn't do this by myself. Even though I'm here by myself, I had so many people that I bounced ideas off of and looked to for some support and looked to for their input and ideas. And to have people rally around me and really be excited, not just for me, but about this podcast was really exciting and very inspirational. And I am just such a blessed human that I know people that support me and are my cheerleaders in the background and, believe in what I have to say and aren't just like, Brittany, no, stop. So here we are. We are gonna do this. And it's so damn exciting. So coming up, right, in future episodes, topics that I'm gonna be covering are gonna include like, what makes me dysfunctional today? What makes me dysfunctional this week? Like at the end of the day, I am healing, but I am not healed. Right. And it is a process. And some days my brain feels like a great big squiggly, like scribbles all over a paper. And it's like, how does any of that make sense? Girl, I don't know. How does that make sense? Right. So we're going to talk about what makes me dysfunctional today. And we're going to talk about overcoming grief and trauma. We're going to talk about what your life looks like if you don't address and overcome some of the trauma that has been inflicted upon your life. Like, how does that impact you today? And even if you have, how does that impact you today? We're going to talk about some of my inner dark thoughts. I encourage you to share yours. We're going to talk about how we're going to talk about relationships, because doesn't everybody like to talk about relationships? I have some fun stories. So there is going to be some amazing guests that I am going to pull in and talk to, because like I said, I know some phenomenal people that have amazing stories of overcoming adversity and what that looked like for them. And I want to give a space for them to talk about that, to celebrate them, and so that you can find somebody that you can connect to, that you can relate to, right? I'm going to keep it 100 all the time. I'm going to be my most authentic self, and I'm going to show up however I show up that day. And I want to hear from you. I want you to be able to tell me what makes you dysfunctional today. How have you worked to better yourself? I want you to be able to go on to the Dysfunctionally Yours Instagram page and engage there. And let's get talking, and let's share those things so we can talk about them on the pod. How much fun is that? I want to give a platform for you to share what makes you authentically you. So if you like the sound of this, please subscribe to this podcast, and please follow the Dysfunctionally Yours podcast on Instagram, where you can engage and, get your voice out there as well. I will be back every Monday with a new episode of Dysfunctionally Yours. And in the meantime, don't be afraid to be great. Toodles, poodles, bye.